Thank you guys so much for coming. I first wanted to thank Pastor Irene and Inspire for giving this opportunity to speak at this month's Not Anela. Today, I wanted to share a topic that's very close to my heart, and that is chronic illness and pain. I want to preface by saying I'm not a medical professional in any way. This is just based on a lot of research that I accumulated over the years, and then some of my own personal experiences. Um, I want to preface also by saying this presentation is a bit long. It's an hour and 5 minutes, so if you need to go to the bathroom or eat snacks or walk around, that's totally fine because there's no intermission. So, sorry. Today's presentation is about finding joy amidst chronic illness and pain, but we're going to dive more deep into other topics. We're going to talk about how chronic illness impacts the person physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, both negatively and positively. We're going to talk about how to support someone with chronic illness, how to support yourself if you have a chronic illness, how to support yourself if you're a caregiver, and I'm just going to close by some lessons that I've learned from having a chronic illness and lessons that I'm still learning. So let's start off by defining what is a chronic illness. The CDC defines chronic illnesses as conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical attention or limit activities of daily living or both. So some examples of chronic illnesses that we're familiar with are anemia, arthritis, cancer, COPD, Crohn's, cystic fibrosis, diabetes, endometriosis, epilepsy, fibromyalgia, heart disease, high blood pressure, HIV or AIDS, migraines, MS, Parkinson's, and the list goes on and on. But I don't want to keep you guys here forever. I'd like to do a little activity with you guys. I would like everyone to close their eyes. And when I say the word chronic illness or disability, what is the first image or word that comes to mind? Don't think about it, and when you get that word, just hold on to it. I'm going to use it a little bit later. When I thought of the word chronic illness or disability, the first image that came to mind was a person in a wheelchair, or maybe using a cane. And while that's accurate, these are what we call visible disabilities. This category includes disabilities which have any visible indicator that a person is disabled. However, there are many illnesses that aren't visible to the human eye. There are invisible disabilities which have no indicators. You could look at someone without getting to know them and you would never know that they have a disability. An invisible illness is a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside, yet it can limit or challenge a person's movement, senses, or activities. So that went on the right one. I love this picture here that says, not every disability is visible. And on the bottom, there's a statistic that says over 42 million Americans have a severe disability and 96% of them are unseen. That's crazy when we think about that. Therefore, we can't define a disability solely on a person's visible assistive equipment or mobility aids. Some examples of invisible illnesses that we're familiar with are fibromyalgia, migraines, neuropathy, TBI, lupus, Lyme disease, diabetes, RA, and the list goes on and on. And while these people that have these illnesses might sometimes need a mobility aid, a lot of times they don't. Next, we're going to talk about what is a dynamic disability. So when I think of dynamic disability, I think of a roller coaster. It's a condition or impairment that varies in severity and impact over time. Unlike a static disability, which stays the same, such as amputation or paralysis, a dynamic disability has periods of remission or exacerbation. So this means the person has some good days and they have bad days. They could have a day where they need a wheelchair, and the next day they could walk on their own. They could be in severe pain 1 second, and the next second they'd be okay. People who have dynamic disabilities have a hard time explaining to people about their illness because their symptoms constantly change. Okay, before we dive into the topics, I wanted to introduce myself because some of you guys know me, but some of you guys may not. Hi, my name is Ayana. Most people call me Pai Pai. Oh yeah. I'm 25 years old, getting older every day. I have two amazing dogs, that's Melee and Bear at the bottom. They're crazy, but I love them to death. I have an amazing husband, you guys know him as Matt Matt. I have an amazing little sister known as Fishy. I got my BSW, my Bachelor's in Social Work in 2023. I recently just got a new job at Big Brothers Big Sisters. I love serving at my church here at KCC. I do the kids program, and also at MPC, I'm a high school leader, and I love building relationships with kids and helping them build a relationship with Jesus. And I have a chronic illness. So when you guys close your eyes and you thought of the word chronic illness and disability, most people don't picture me as having an illness. You guys already know I have an illness, so that doesn't count. But most people think of someone older. But this is what disability can look like. Chronic illness, unfortunately, does not discriminate. It can affect anyone at any age, any gender, any race, at any time. There is no one look for someone with a chronic illness. I want to talk a little bit about my life before chronic illness. A lot of you guys knew me before. I was a very busy person. I had a very type A personality. I was very stubborn, and whatever I set my mind to, I got it done. I was also a perfectionist in school, in jiu-jitsu, and everything I did. I coached Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is a type of martial arts, 5 days a week. I also trained over 20 hours a week. And on top of that, I did more exercises, HIIT training, strength conditioning. I was always moving. Like I could never walk from one place to another. I had to be doing lunges or squats or jumping jacks. I was very crazy. Every time I had free time, I would be serving, whether that was with houseless people, with kids, or doing worship and dancing. I loved going out in the sun. I loved babysitting. And that was a little bit of my life before. And then in 2013, I went to bed healthy and I woke up sick. I was 13 years old at the time. I became extremely fatigued one day. I had fevers every day, nausea. The list goes on and on and on. And I went to see doctor after doctor and no one could figure out what it was. I changed my PCP about 2 or 3 times. And they were all telling me that I was fine. It was just part of growing up. So I listened to them, and anytime I had a little bit of energy, I would go back to my life. I would train jiu-jitsu again, and then that would send me into a long flare-up for months. There was a point in time where I was bedridden for over 6 months. I was so weak, my family got one of those like beds that go up and down with the remotes so that they could help me sit up and eat. They would wash my hair in bed because I couldn't shower. And we kept seeing doctors and no one could figure out what was wrong. This went on for about a year. Eventually, I went to a pulmonologist for my asthma, and they diagnosed me with Epstein-Barr virus. Most of you guys know this as mononucleosis, which is very common. A lot of teenagers get it. And usually it lasts only 2 weeks, but for me, it was very severe, and it lasted a long time because I kept pushing myself, so I didn't know I was really sick. By the time I got diagnosed, my symptoms were better, and I eventually went back to my normal life. Fast forward to summer of 2015, I got all these weird symptoms again. I had extreme brain fog, I was weak, I was fainting all the time, I had nausea, hard time concentrating. I was just in high school at this time, and I would be studying for tests like crazy. When it was time to take a test, I couldn't remember anything, so I was failing a lot of my classes. And again, I went to doctors, and they told me it was in your head or it's just anxiety. I was told by the best specialist that I just need to eat more vegetables, which I eat a lot of vegetables, so it wasn't that, or it's just hormones. And when you seek medical professionals time after time again, and you're a 15-year-old girl, you start to believe them. So I started to think that it was in my head, and I would try and go on with my normal life. But I physically couldn't. I couldn't walk sometimes. My friends would have to carry me from class to class. Once my principal actually carried me up the stairs to my Spanish class. And it took many doctors to figure out what was wrong with me. Since I was underage, I had to see pediatric doctors, and there's not a lot of pediatric doctors in Hawaii. So sometimes I waited over 9-10 months to see a doctor. I was eventually diagnosed in 2016 with myalgic encephalitis, which is also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. This is a chronic complex neuroimmune disease, which is often triggered by like a virus, and any kind of exercise or daily activities of any kind, whether that's physical, mental, or emotional, can make the symptoms worse. When I got this diagnosis, it was so validating for me because I had a name to what I was going through. I later flew to California for intense 3-day testing at the specialist, and there they diagnosed me with mast cell activation syndrome. This is a condition that causes mast cells to release high amounts of chemicals in your body, and this caused me to have a lot of symptoms, which explained a lot of the hives I was getting every day, the rashes, the fevers. I was also diagnosed with, or tested positive for Lyme disease and Bartonella, but doctors said there's no Lyme in Hawaii, so they didn't do any further testing. I had a high inflammation in my body. My CD4 cell count, which is the white blood cell that fights infection, was 49, whereas the normal should be 500 to 1500. After California, I started a very intense medication regimen, which made me super sick. And I fought for doctors here in Hawaii because I only had support in California. I really wanted to see a rheumatologist, but they rejected me because I didn't have any autoimmune symptoms. Fast forward, I later got diagnosed with spondyloarthritis, which is a rheumatic disease, which means it's an inflammatory type of arthritis. And actually, I found a rheumatologist that finally believed me. And then I also got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Later on, I would see doctors after doctors, and while they believed these diagnoses, they just didn't know how to treat me. So I just got passed on from doctor to doctor. I spent a lot of my time trying new medications, getting sick from side effects, getting allergic reactions. I flew to LA, San Jose, and Maui to see doctors, and they would just say there's nothing they could do for me. I just had to fix my mindset. To this day, 10 years later, my symptoms are greatly improved. However, I still only have a limited amount of energy. I have good days, but I have chronic fatigue, pain, and my usual symptoms every day. I feel blessed because right now I have 2 doctors who are trying to find the right pain management for me. However, it took a very long time to get to this point. Unfortunately, my story is not common. When I looked for people like me on the internet, I found thousands of stories just like me. And while I don't wish my illness or pain on anyone, I'm really grateful for my chronic illness journey and all of you guys who walked on this journey with me. So that's a little snippet of my chronic illness journey. Next, I want to talk about experiences with my wheelchair. I got my wheelchair in 2016, which was a very hard decision for me because I'm very stubborn. Everyone knows that. So I'm going to talk about the disadvantages first, and then later we'll talk about the advantages. The disadvantages was a lot of stigma and discrimination from others. Because I looked young, people would say, "You're too pretty to be in a wheelchair." People assume that I couldn't talk on my own, and they would just directly talk to the person who was pushing me. People would stare at me all the time. I was accused for faking my illness or using it for special privileges. Another thing was I constantly had to rely on someone to push me. I didn't have one of those wheelie ones because that defeated the whole purpose of saving energy. So someone always had to push me. And while that person didn't mind at all, sometimes I felt bad. Navigating places that were not ADA friendly. You don't realize what's ADA friendly and not until you need a wheelchair. There are times where we had to take longer trips because there was no ramps. Traveling restaurants, Texas is very not ADA accessible. And then sometimes my family and friends would have to miss out on that. Another thing was my wheelchair made my illness visible, which sometimes made me feel invisible. I know that's kind of confusing, but I couldn't hide my illness when I was in my wheelchair, and so I was always explaining to people why I was in a wheelchair. Sometimes that got a little tiring. Next, I want to talk about the advantages, though. The advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, even though the list looks shorter. Number one, it allowed me to do so much more. I only had a little bit of energy, and so most of my time was just spent in the house. My wheelchair allowed me to go places that I couldn't do on my own. This picture is me and Anela in Great America around midnight on New Year's Eve. I could not have done that if I didn't have my wheelchair. I also had less flare-ups. My symptoms were much more controlled because I was saving my energy, or when I was sick, I always had a seat. And I just experienced things I couldn't without my wheelchair. Another thing is I got to skip the lines. I got to skip the lines at the Great America, in the airport, although that's not a good reason to get a wheelchair, but it was nice. One person with a chronic illness said, "My wheelchair is more than just a mobility device. It's my vehicle to freedom." And that's how I felt. My wheelchair gave me freedom. So if you're someone or you know someone that's contemplating getting a wheelchair or not, and you're worried about the disadvantages, just know that a wheelchair can really help you. And don't worry about everyone else. Okay, now we're finally going to get into our main topics. We're going to talk about how chronic illness impacts a person physically. This is kind of hard because every chronic illness is so different. And even someone with the same chronic illness can have different experiences and different symptoms. I tried to find things that people have in common. Number one is dealing with unpredictable symptoms. People with chronic illness often have to face new symptoms every single day. I get new symptoms sometimes every day or every week. My newest symptom is my medication. Every time I swallow or chew food, my chest hurts so much. So you're constantly navigating new symptoms, new medications, side effects, and deciding are you going to endure the side effects or you're just going to get off the medication, which could be worse for you. Another thing is everything has a consequence. Those people who have limited amount of energy have to face the consequence of their actions after doing something. Another thing is the long-term effects of chronic pain on their brain. It said that it has an impact on memory and concentration, and chronic pain can disrupt the ability of the brain to process and retain information, leading to difficulty in focusing and remembering. Another thing is fatigue. Fatigue is one of the main symptoms for a lot of people, and it's hard to explain fatigue to someone who's never experienced it. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between fatigue and being tired. Being tired is usually a consequence of doing something. So maybe you worked all day, you had a long night, you had your kids, or you worked out, and after, of course, you're so tired, which is hard and frustrating. But you can be fatigued from doing absolutely nothing. I wake up and I'm fatigued. Sometimes I just breathe or sit and I'm fatigued. So that's one difference. Another difference is being tired usually can get better with rest. So maybe you sleep like 7, 8, 9, 10 hours and you feel better. With fatigue, no matter how much you sleep, you're still fatigued. I could sleep 2 hours, or I could sleep 2 days, and my fatigue is the same. Fatigue is this overwhelming heaviness that never goes away. Okay, I want to do a little activity with you guys. So I give you guys paper. I want you guys to think of some things that you do on a daily basis, from the minute you wake up to the moment you go to bed. So things like brush your teeth, go to work, eat breakfast, feed your dog, yeah, stuff like that. Okay, for you guys, like 1 minute, and then we're gonna watch a little video. You also can just do it in your head if you're too tired. It's Anderson. And I'm gonna move, or maybe I don't have to move. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna play the video now.
Spoon theory is a form of energy rationing for chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue is a constant companion for those with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is called an invisible illness because you can't see the symptoms, but they are debilitating. People with chronic fatigue can't always live an ordinary life because they're haunted by an exhaustion that just never goes away. I have chronic fatigue syndrome. I developed an autoimmune disorder a few years ago, and it's real weird to go from being a type A, highly productive person with an American work ethic, to being someone who has to schedule naps into his day or his body falls apart. So, spoon theory has been really helpful for me in navigating this transition. And spoon theory was a term coined by Christine Miserandino in a 2003 essay on her blog. And she tells the story of being out to lunch with one of her friends. She took out medication for lupus, which was an autoimmune disorder that she has. And her friend said, "What's it like having lupus? What's it really like?" And so Christine looked around the diner table where they were, and she picked up all the spoons. And she handed a handful of spoons to her friend, and she says, "These are your energy rations. And anytime you do something in a day, it costs you one spoon. And once you're out of spoons for the day, you're out of energy and you can't do anything else that day." And so she walked through a typical day with her friend. I get up in the morning, I take a shower, that's one spoon. I make breakfast, that's another spoon. If you get a flat tire on the way to work, then that costs spoons that you were planning to use later that day. And at some point in the day, you have to look at your available spoons and often decide what doesn't get done. Having a chronic illness made me ruthless about my priorities. Because now I get to the end of the day and I just don't have enough, or the middle of the day, and I don't have enough energy to do all the things I had planned to do. So I have to count my spoons and decide what's really worth it. So spoon theory has been very helpful for me in rationing my own energy. I hope that it's helpful for you in getting through the day and getting as much done as you can. But if you do have chronic fatigue and you've got to ration your energy and you're not able to do everything that normal people can do, I want you to be a little forgiving with yourself, because this is a game, just like any other game we play. And how well you play this game determines what you win.
If you don't want to open your third eye, then
Of spoonies because of the spoon theory. So now I want you guys to look at your list, or if it's in your head, I want you guys to get rid of half of those things on your list. So choose what is most important or what you guys have to get done. You can do this in your head if you guys don't want to write. And this is what life with chronic illness is like for a lot of people. They have to ask themselves, how will I use my spoons, or how will I use my energy every day? It takes a lot of choices and thought and planning, which can be exhausting at times. Sometimes I have to say no to things that are important to me in order to do the non-negotiable things. Sometimes there's no right choice or good choice. Sometimes I have to choose between family events or church. Sometimes I had to choose between doctors or school. And this is the reality of thousands of people who struggle with chronic illnesses. For me, Saturday and Sunday are mine and Matt's busy days. We volunteer a lot, we have church, we have family gatherings, we have social events with friends. But in order to do these things, I usually have to save my energy so that I have enough energy to go to it. So that means sacrificing the day before and not doing anything. That also means planning for time after to recover. So a lot of times the day before, I have to say no to a lot of stuff. And other times I may rest for a big event and I still have a bad flare-up that makes me miss the event. Because chronic illness is just very unpredictable. So next we're going to talk about how chronic illness impacts someone mentally. People think that when you get sick, it impacts you physically the most, but a lot of times the biggest impact is how it affects you emotionally and mentally. First is loss of autonomy and freedom. You have to rely on people for the simplest tasks. When I first got sick, I was in high school, which for most people is when they're starting to be independent. They're getting jobs or learning how to drive. but I had to rely on people for the simplest things: how to walk, how to open a bottle of water, from go to class. And for someone like me who loves helping others, asking for help is a big weakness of mine. Sometimes asking for help just felt wrong. And this can take a huge toll on a person mentally. It can lead to feelings of powerlessness, hopelessness, and feeling like a burden. This quote is from a girl who struggles with fibromyalgia, and she said, "All freedom to be who I worked so hard to be was taken away. This changes the way I see and feel about myself and my future, especially since I used to be so very active and driven to succeed in a life that I loved living." Another thing is, oftentimes with chronic illness, you have to lose the things that bring you joy. Morgan Freeman, who also has fibromyalgia, he said he used to go sailing, fly jet airplanes, and he was a car enthusiast. Enthusiast? Yeah. But he had to give this up because his pain was just so debilitating. I didn't do any of those things, but for me, the things that brought me joy was coaching jiu-jitsu, training jiu-jitsu, competing, exercise, dancing with my kids at church, teaching my kids, coaching, babysitting, going out with friends. And I lost a lot of those things when I got sick. I found this journal entry from when I was, I think, 20, yeah, from 4 years ago. And I just wanted to read it for you guys to get a little glimpse of what it's like. So this is from November 28th, 2020. It says, "I'm a joyful, energetic girl who wants to use her energy to bring joy to people, but I have no energy. It's exhausting having a chronic illness when you're the type of person who wants to change the world. It can be frustrating when your body can't keep up with your heart and passion to serve. But there's something in me, I don't know what it is, but I can't stand to watch people and not help. I hate feeling useless. Yet no matter how tired I am, I will want to go, do, help, and serve. I have to stop myself because if not, I'll keep going until I faint. I will always be a doer, and I think that's why it's hard sometimes having an illness where doing stuff makes me sick. But it doesn't stop me, so I'm glad I'm a doer and a helper because it's in my blood, and even a chronic illness won't stop me. It may help balance me more to teach me to take care of myself, but it won't stop me. Sometimes helping is healing. At least it is for me. It may not be physically healing, because let's be real, helping at R&R stands for Revive and Refresh, and it was like a mobile houseless shower. It was a mobile shower for people facing homelessness, which I used to like clean bathrooms and toilet and like talk to the houseless people. So anyway, it says, and it may be not physically healing, because let's be real, helping at R&R, church, etc. is physically draining. I need days to recover. But it's mentally, emotionally, and spiritually healing. It's not healthy to stay inside with only yourself forever. You need people to thrive. You need people to heal. You need to serve and give back in order to find yourself sometimes. So that was a little glimpse. I forgot I wrote that. So things that are important to a person's mental health are also affected from chronic illness. Things like sleeping, eating, exercising, going out. A lot of times people lose. So it's not uncommon for those to have chronic illness to also have a mental illness. One study found that 71.6% of people with chronic diseases experienced mild to extremely severe levels of depressive symptoms. Next, we're going to talk about stigma. So what is stigma? Stigma may look like being discriminated against, judged, or harassed, which is a common everyday experience for people who live with invisible or chronic illnesses. So people tend to doubt the reality of things that they can't see. In our society, if you look fine, you are fine. And this assumption can lead to the conclusion that maybe you're not working hard enough to push through symptoms. Maybe you're making your symptoms up to avoid responsibility, or maybe your symptoms are your fault. And I'm not alone in experiencing this type of stigma. If you look online, there is thousands of people who experience discrimination and stigma every single day. This stigma affects people in their relationships, their education, healthcare, and employment. One example of stigma is when using a handicapped stall, and maybe you don't have a visible indicator like a wheelchair or mobility aid, but you still need that stall. Some people can experience shouting in car parking lots on many occasions. I took that from a quote from an article. I personally haven't experienced that, but even though I have a handicap pass, I don't like using it because I'm afraid of what people might say and if they judge me. Another example of stigma is people struggle to disclose their illness in fear that people may not believe them. Another common scenario is when people learn about a person's illness, they may take away their independence, view them as weak, or assume they can't do something. I'm just going to read a few of these quotes. But you were fine yesterday. You must be faking your illness. You don't want to get well. If you did, you would be better by now. Oh, it's not that bad. I'm tired too. But you don't look sick. You're probably just stressed, not sick. You need to just do exercise or yoga. Have you tried to drink water? You're too young to have a chronic illness. These are examples of stigma, and these are some of the things that have been told to me personally. And unfortunately, many people experience this every single day. So I want to give another example. When people see me, they usually see a young, that's me, a young, healthy 25-year-old. We did a photo shoot and I almost fell on the rocks. A young 25-year-old smiling and happy, full of joy. People that don't know of my illness may see me as lazy if I don't do something, or maybe see me as selfish if I choose to sit or rest, or maybe boring if I don't participate in activities or games. But what people don't see are all the symptoms that I face every day. The fatigue, the dizziness, the chronic joint and muscle pain, the fevers, how much meds I took just to be there, how much energy and thought and planning it took to be at an event, the painful flare-ups that I would get afterwards. So how is stigma harmful to people? Stigma is harmful on many levels, and it can affect a person's identity and their self-worth. It can lead to guilt, shame, and even embarrassment. People may feel ashamed when they're actually having a good day and feel like they always have to be sick. One of the most harmful aspects is when it affects a patient's healthcare. A lot of times, the constant dismissing from doctors can lead an individual to think that it's all in their head and maybe quit looking for treatment. In addition, without having visible signs, it's hard for individuals to ask for public help, such as when they need to sit down or take a break. Sometimes people with chronic pain are stigmatized and labeled as drug seekers. A lot of times individuals, myself included, walk out of the doctor's office feeling judged and unheard. So we already talked a little bit about that. You're just making your illness up. I talked about this in my little journey. So this is called medical gaslighting. And medical gaslighting is a term to describe a medical practitioner that downplays or denies your symptoms. They may blame it on psychological factors, or even say you're imagining them. And this is extremely common to this day. Over 71% of women said their doctors told them that their symptoms were imagined. For those of you who don't know Lady Gaga, she is a huge celebrity and singer. She has fibromyalgia, and she said it took her 5 years to get diagnosed. Because she experienced medical gaslighting. And Lady Gaga has the resources and the money to find good doctors. So just imagine how long it takes for people who don't have what she has. The next slide shows just some articles and proof on how common it is to experience medical gaslighting. These are just some videos off Instagram and articles I found. The average time to diagnose a patient with an invisible illness is 7.6 years in the US, and the average number of doctors that they see before being correctly diagnosed is 8. For one of my illnesses, the spondyloarthritis, 1 out of 3 patients take up to 10 years to get a diagnosis. For me personally, I've seen about 30 to 40 different doctors, and most of them dismiss my symptoms. And because of this, I have anxiety of going to doctors. I refuse to go to the ER unless it's very, very serious, and I downplay my symptoms and my pain. So what can we do about this? How can we break the stigma that's created in this society? Stigma is socially constructed, meaning it's possible to socially deconstruct it. It will take a lot of time, but most stigma comes not from a place of ill intention, but a lack of awareness and education. So number one, we can educate ourselves about illnesses and about invisible and chronic illnesses. You can realize that maybe you don't know everything about a person's life. So don't jump to conclusions, believe them, and validate their pain and experiences. Validation holds extreme power. This can even be more healing than giving advice. Lastly, we need to have conversations. We need to learn to ask questions kindly, and know that it's okay to not know everything. People often think that talking about things and asking questions is disrespectful and rude, but it's not. It's good to be curious as long as it's respectful. Last year or 2 years ago for my speech class, I wrote a little bit about this. So I just wanted to read it for you guys. While our medicine and technology has advanced greatly, our society is still stuck in the harmful belief system that seeing is believing. We can and need to do better to fix what healthy and sick look like. We should not be living in the 21st century where people are living in fear because the world does not know how to respond respectfully and kindly to people with disabilities. We need to break the belief that disabilities only look a certain way. While you alone do not have the power to remove all the stigma that those with disabilities face, you do have the power to choose how you respond and react. So I urge you to do so with compassion and grace, because things are often invisible. Decreasing the stigma of invisible illnesses starts with me, and it starts with you. Thankfully, I got an A in that class. So next, let's talk about how chronic illness can affect you mentally in a positive way. When you get sick, you just see things in a different light. You see the world differently. You appreciate every little thing, and it opens your eyes to all the miracles and blessings you have in life. When I wake up and my pain is like a 3 out of 10 instead of a 6 or 7, I'm so happy. I get excited about what am I going to do, and sometimes I go a little too crazy and push myself. I'm excited when I can go out with my friends, or me and I go out and do some stuff, go out in the sun, going out on drives. Another thing is you learn not to stress over the big things. Before, I used to be stressing over grades, accomplishments. I used to be so overwhelmed and stressed with what society considered important. But when you get sick, you realize what's really important, and that's your mental and physical and spiritual health. Now I don't really stress over things like that, because stress is also a trigger for my illness. I realize my mental and physical health is more important than having the best job. The job I currently have right now is not my dream job, and a lot of people wouldn't choose it, but it's the job that's good for my health, and it's perfect for the season that I'm in right now. Another thing is chronic illness slowed me down. I used to constantly be doing things and I didn't know the word rest. Now I've learned how to breathe, how to rest. And I'm learning that slow life is good for me and that it's better. Sorry, I need to drink water. You guys can do your notes maybe. Okay. Another thing is I learned coping mechanism. Since stress is a huge trigger for my symptoms, I have learned how to de-stress, how to compose myself, how to cope in a healthy way. Also, awareness and empathy. When you guys get sick, or when you get sick, you grow so much more awareness for people, for their pain and for their struggles. You grow empathy because you've experienced pain yourself. Pope Benedict XVI said, illness can be a call to greater compassion and empathy towards others who suffer. Lastly, illness is humbling. It takes away any pride because you're in a place of vulnerability. When you need someone to walk you down the stairs, that's humbling. When you need someone to open a jar because your wrists are too weak, that's humbling. You realize that you need other people and that you can't do life on your own. So next we're going to talk about how chronic illness impacts you socially. Sorry, this is really long. I didn't think I could talk for an hour, but I have a lot to say. I hope you guys are doing okay. So how can chronic illness impact you socially? Number one, reduce engagement with friends. A lot of times people with chronic illnesses often struggle to either create or maintain friendships or relationships because they're dealing with their own symptoms, and that can be draining. Symptoms can make it difficult to socialize with others. It can also be difficult to make and keep plans because of flare-ups and symptoms. Friends may become frustrated with the need to cancel plans. And some people just don't understand, so you tend to isolate and withdraw. But on a positive note, you find out who your real friends are. You learn to prioritize relationships. When you only have a limited amount of energy, you prioritize the important, meaningful relationships instead of spending time with people who don't really value your time. You also appreciate your time more. Before, I didn't appreciate my time as much, but now I don't take it for granted. When I have time with my friends or my family, I'm more present and intentional with my time and conversations because it took a lot of work to be there sometimes. Next is you get better at drawing boundaries. I'm not good at drawing boundaries, and I'm still learning to do this. But because of your energy, you are forced to set boundaries with others. You have to say no to people and to things because you can't do everything. So you have to learn to prioritize what's important to you. And lastly, it gives you empathy and understanding to others. When you experience pain or illness or any type of adversity, it gives you the gift of connecting with people. It gives you instant connections at times and instant relationships when you find people who have the same thing that you have or similar experiences. So next we're going to talk about how chronic illness impacts a person spiritually. In a negative manner, sometimes people can use your illness as a direct result of your faith. I've been told you're not healed because you don't pray hard enough, or God made you sick so that you can rest and slow down. And while that's not true, sometimes it can affect your faith with God. Maybe it can feel like God doesn't care about you or deserted you. Maybe people question, or many people question God and his goodness in their life. It can be easy at times for people to wake up with horrible symptoms and doubt if God is even there or if he cares for you. And some people may harbor a belief that their illness is a punishment from God. But in a positive way, for me, my illness fueled my spiritual development. And it did this in three main ways. It grew my faith, it made me closer to him, and made me trust him. St. Padre Pio said, "Do not fear illness or adversity. Rather, embrace it as an opportunity for spiritual growth and surrender to God's will." I love that quote. So, number one, growing in faith. A lot of people with chronic illnesses say that their illness helped mature their faith. For me, when I was at my physically weakest moments, I had to rely on God. I embraced my illness as an invitation to draw closer to God, allowing it to shape me into a more compassionate person. For me, illness was a reminder to depend on God and that I couldn't do things on my own. Next, developing an intimacy with God and growing closer to him. A lot of people say that suffering can bring people closer to God and that pain can allow people to see their strengths and weaknesses. For me, suffering allowed me to feel God's compassion. My favorite Bible verse is 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10. And the context of this verse is Paul is pleading with God to take away his suffering and his thorn in his side. But God responds with this passage that a lot of us know. It says, He said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. For the sake of Christ, I am content with the weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." When I was weak, I saw God's strength even more. Paul could rejoice and boast in God because he knew the power that God gave him. Next is learning to trust God. God was the one constant in my life amidst all the inconsistency and unpredictability surrounding my health. He was something that I could count on. Chronic illness can teach people to trust God and trust that He's using their situation for good, even if we really don't understand why. I realized God has a plan for me. I heard a statement that said, "Those who have suffered make the most effective comforters." Suffering gives you compassion for those who are hurting, enabling us to help others more. For those of you guys who don't know, I think I told you guys, I'm in social work, and my job a lot of times is to help people who have gone through hard things. And my illness has just given me more compassion and more empathy for others. One more quote, sorry. Stephen F. Saint said, "Sufferers want to be ministered to by people who suffered." I really like that. Okay, sorry, I have to drink that. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next thing is how to find joy amidst chronic illness. One of the most common questions I get asked is, how are you so positive and happy if you have a chronic illness and you live with these symptoms every day? And the answer is, I'm not. I'm not always happy and positive, but I do always have joy. So what is joy? Joy is the settled assurance that God is in control of all the details of my life, the quiet confidence that ultimately everything is going to be all right, and the determined choice to praise God in every situation. And that's from Kay Warren. The two things I focused on in this definition is settled assurance and determined choice. Joy isn't something that just happens to us. Joy is a choice. We have to keep choosing joy every single day. There's a common belief that I'll be happy when. So I'll be happy when I find a doctor to diagnose me. I'll be happy when my symptoms are better. I'll be happy when I get to go out more and see my friends. But this is often a toxic way of thinking. Happiness depends on things that are happening. It's dependent on our circumstances around us, whereas joy runs deeper than that. Joy can still exist in times of adversity. James 1 verses 2-3 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance." James says that we can have joy in the midst of trials. Another thing I love about joy is joy can coexist with other feelings. I can have joy and still grieve my old life at times. I can have joy and still be in pain. I can have joy and still be disappointed that I had to pass up job opportunities that I wanted, outings and events that my body couldn't handle. Joy is a choice. The next slide says, joy is not necessarily the absence of suffering, but the presence of God. Oh, and there's me being happy because I got a free muffin that I took from the buffet. It's me finding joy. So the next, we're going to talk about how to find joy and just some practical tips. Ultimately, joy comes from God, but these are just some things that have helped me. So number one, practice gratitude. I have a gratitude journal and I write every day just some things that I'm thankful for. And this can help you appreciate what you have and cultivate a sense of abundance, which makes it easier to experience joy. This also activates neurotransmitters like dopamine, which we associate with pleasure, and serotonin, which regulates mood. The next thing is look for joy in anything and everything. In the simple things, in the ordinary things, like my free muffin, anything. The next thing is find new passions. Like I said before, a lot of times people with chronic illnesses have to lose their passions, but find new ones, things that you can do. The next thing is find people who share in your joy. This is crucial. Build relationships with people who are excited for you, who are happy for you, who support you. Next is do not compare your life to others. A lot of times we have a lot of FOMO or we miss out on a lot when we're sick. But when we compare our lives to others, we miss out on the joy that's happening right now because we're so focused on what we don't have. Next is serving others. Helping others brings you so much joy. It's something that I can't explain. Serving allows us to take our eyes off ourselves, what we're feeling and what we're going through, and help us to focus on others. Helping others also helps you build connection, which is essential to have joy. And lastly, loving God. Praying, worshiping, looking for his goodness, and loving others. Okay, I hope you guys are doing okay. We're moving on. We're going to talk about how to support someone with chronic illness. And this may look differently if that person is a spouse, a friend, a family member, but these are just some practical tips that we can do. Number one, validate their experiences and illness. People with chronic illnesses always fear people won't believe them, and they've been through a lot. So simple conversations and phrases that experience their pain, their symptoms mean everything. Next, be there for them. A simple text, call, etc. Just saying, I'm here for you, I'm checking in with you, I love you, is so important, even if they don't reply or answer the phone. Next is don't give up. Many people with chronic illnesses lose friends because of their illnesses. They say no a lot, they change their plans. And because of that, people stop inviting them because they think they don't want to go. But don't do that. Keep inviting them, even if they don't say yes, because that makes them feel included. Don't pressure them to come out or reply. People feel bad when they already have to say no, so don't make them feel more guilty. Another thing is listen to what they really need. A lot of times it's natural for us, I know for me especially, to want to help people and to fix things. I want to always give advice and make sure that they're okay. But sometimes just offering empathy is more valuable than offering solutions. Next is reframing questions. So a lot of times we say, can I do anything to help? Or let me know if you need anything. And this can be hard for people because then they have to think of what they need help for. So maybe reframing things such as, oh, I'm at the store now. Would you like me to pick up a few groceries? Or I made a lot of food. Can I drop some off for you? This makes it easier for the person to accept help because they're simply answering yes or no versus thinking of what they really need. And that takes less effort and energy. Next, offering to drop off food and do errands. One of the biggest things you can do for someone is research and educate about their diagnosis. This shows that you care about them and you want to know about what they're going through. When Matt researches my diagnoses or when we talk about my medications together, I feel less alone. And lastly, follow their health journey. Follow up on their doctor's appointments, their medications, maybe their diets, and then later on follow up with them. Oh, how was your doctor? How was your test? Being invested in their health journey is a great way to support someone. Okay, next is empathetic listening. Empathetic listening is a communication technique that involves active listening to a person with empathy and understanding. In other words, it's about trying to seek their perspective. Provide encouragement and support instead of criticism and advice. I read that empathy fuels connections. So feel with people. Try and recognize the emotion in others and then communicate that. Next is don't assume. Don't assume that just because someone looks good, that they're doing okay. So instead, ask them how you're doing, instead of maybe making a statement saying, oh, you look so good today. People with chronic illnesses are really good at masking their symptoms. Another thing is be patient and flexible. If you know me and Matt, we're both planners. We love to have the details down, but at the end of the day, I could have a flare or symptoms, and my illness has the final say. So it's important to be flexible and okay with plans changing with your friends and family. Next is be careful of toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is the belief that people should maintain a positive mindset no matter how difficult or a situation is. So if you know me, I'm a very positive person, so I have to be careful with this. And it's extremely common because naturally we want to be positive, we want to give people hope, but that can be dismissive of people. It could invalidate their experiences. So we need to be careful of their language. So some examples of toxic positivity is maybe someone shares about what they're going through, and then we just say, oh, you'll be fine. You just need to be more positive. A lot of times this is common in churches because we want to give Bible verses or motivational quotes when it's not appropriate. Saying things like, you just need to trust in Jesus. He'll take care of things, or everything happens for a reason. While these things are okay to say at some times, it may be inappropriate to share at that moment. The next thing is know when to help and when not to. So listen to what a person really needs. Oftentimes, as caregivers or people or family and friends, we get so worried about our loved ones not pushing themselves too much or doing things because we don't want their symptoms to get worse. I know I struggle with this. Whenever Matt's hip is sore, he's so stubborn and doesn't listen to me. But remember, the patient knows their limitations and their body the best. So for example, every time I say yes to doing something, I already know in my head that I'm saying yes to the consequences as well. And I'm okay with that. So think about maybe what do they truly need in that moment? Maybe they're saying yes to an event and you think that they shouldn't go, but maybe they just want to feel useful. Maybe they need some mental health. They need to see people and socialize. Just like that little journal thing I wrote, I knew I was going to get sick after, but I needed to help and serve in that moment. So sometimes saying slow down or you just need to rest isn't always the best thing. Of course, use logical thinking if they're being extremely stubborn, like which I can be at times, and they're overdoing themselves too much. Then of course that's good to tell them not to. Next is have code words and signs. So me and Matt have code sign. It's basically just ASL when we're at an event. So I can signal to him that I'm having a flare and we need to leave because I don't like to be the one that says we have to go. I feel bad. So I just signal to him that we need to go and then he'll tell us when we have to go. It can also be used to check in on people. So we do things like, are you okay? When we're not close to each other. We also remind each other, remind me to drink water or take meds. And also times I use ASO because I'm too weak to talk. Okay, next we're going to talk about how to support yourself if you are a caretaker. Caretaking is a lot of work, and if you take care of someone, I applaud you because it's not easy, and we appreciate you. So number one is identifying personal barriers. The first task in removing personal barriers is to identify what's in your way. Do you think maybe you're being selfish for putting your needs first? Do you have trouble asking for what you need? Do you feel inadequate if you ask for help? A lot of times caregivers have this misconception that increases their stress and it gets in the way of good self-care. So identify your source of stress. Ask yourself, what is causing stress for me? Some examples of sources of stress might be that you just have too much to do. You have the inability to say no, feelings of inadequacy, and then identify what you can and cannot change. Ask yourself, what do I have control over? What can I change? Even a small change can make a big difference. The next is making goals and action steps. So if your goal is to feel more healthy, then make action steps for that. Things that are easy and manageable. Maybe for you, walk 3 times a week for 5 minutes at a time, or take a 10-minute break every day, or make an appointment to that physical checkup that you've been putting off. Next is communicate constructively. Speak clear and specific. Don't hint or hope the person will guess what you need. Be a good listener. Listening is one of the most important aspects of communication. Next is remember that your job is hard, and whether people say it or not, we appreciate you. And then have a support system. A lot of times caregivers are just so focused on taking care of others, they don't take care of themselves. So ask for and accept help. Next is celebrate the small wins. Celebrate all the little things that you and the person you take care of do together. Maybe it's small, maybe it's that you guys went outside for a little bit today. But whatever it is, celebrate that. Lastly is take care of yourself. Remember that it's not selfish to focus on your own needs and desires. And it's part of your job to take care of yourself in order to take care of someone. So what does self-care look like for you? Maybe it's taking time off without feeling guilty. Maybe it's getting proper rest. Maybe it's participating in activities such as reading a book, taking a shower. Whatever self-care looks like for you, find time every day to do something. And then lastly, know what burnout and caregiver stress looks like to prevent it. This looks like being burdened or worried all the time, feeling tired too much, sleeping too much, gaining or losing weight, becoming easily irritated or angry, losing interest in things that you used to enjoy, feeling sad, having frequent headaches or pain or other health problems. Okay, now we are going to talk about how to support yourself if you have chronic illness. This looks different for everyone because everyone has different symptoms, but I just tried to think of a few things. Actually, not a few things, it's a whole long list. But number 1, know your symptoms and then invest in products relieving them. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm a very cheap Chinese girl, and I don't like buying things, but the one thing that I do buy is things that could possibly decrease my symptoms. So for me, my biggest symptoms now are like nausea and dizziness, fatigue, and joint and muscle pain. So I invest in symptoms that could help with that. So for fatigue, I have this like cupping thing, red light therapy, acupressure mats. For my nausea and dizziness, I have nausea sticks. I have a band that actually shocks me and sends like these electrical signals so that I don't get as nauseous. I also have my heated blanket for my joint pain, which is amazing. I have like 4 massage guns, 10 unit, and I've tried a million pain creams. I also have really bad heat intolerance, so I get cold and hot super fast. So I have tons of cooling patches, fans. I have a watch that changes like temperature, that helps me regulate my temperature. So whatever your symptoms are, find things that can help decrease those symptoms. Next is movement. It's hard when you're constantly fatigued and in pain, but even just a little bit of movement, whether it's walking around the house or if you can tolerate it, or around outside is good for your pain. Next is obviously don't overdo yourself, which I'm very guilty of doing. Eating in moderation. People always ask me what diets I'm on. I've been on a million diets. I've tried gluten-free diets, dairy-free diets. I've eliminated all things with antihistamines. But I just eat in moderation, and that's because some food brings me happiness, and I don't like taking a lot of things out. So, yes. Next is stretching and sunlight. Sunlight is so important for you. I'm very pale now. That's because I don't want the sun a lot because it makes me sick. But even just a little bit of vitamin D is good for your physical and mental health if you can tolerate it. Next is Find technology and products to help you. I know I said this, but specifically tech things. There's so many things on your phone that can help you. I voice text a lot because my wrist gets sore. I have something like this at home. So instead of holding my phone at night watching my movies, which makes my arthritis worse, it just holds it for me. So find products to help you. There's also a million supplements that do something. Yeah, sometimes it helps, not really. Find resources that can help you. Music, shows, anything. I love happy music, worship music, and then finding shows that can just bring you joy. And then take breaks. Take breaks and sit when you need. I'm telling you guys that, and I don't always do that. But yes. Okay, next is give yourself time to grieve. There is nothing wrong with grieving your old life before you got sick. Dr. Boyle said this quote, people don't often associate chronic illness with grief, but the realization that life will never be what it was and the future is not what you thought it would be is a major loss. So it's okay to grieve your life, your old life, and maybe even your future life. Learn to ask for help and be vulnerable. This is my hardest one. Courage requires vulnerability. Accepting help is hard for me, but the thing that I think of is think about how much you love helping others. I love helping people. So every time I don't want to accept help, I think of what I'm doing to that person and I'm preventing them from helping me, which is sad. So then I'm like, okay, yes, you can help me. Know that people want to help you. So accept help. Adjust your priorities accordingly. Work with your energy level. Your priorities look different than other people's priorities. So let go of these expectations that you have on yourself. Remember, your body is different than the person next to you. So don't be hard on yourself. Except, this one is a really hard one for me too. Accept that good enough is enough. As someone who's a perfectionist, I always want to clean the house and make everything perfect. But sometimes I can't always do that. So sometimes it's okay to just have the house a little bit clean instead of perfectly clean. Next is make little manageable goals. So for me, I like to get everything done, but of course my body doesn't like that. So maybe if you can't do the laundry, that's okay. Maybe do one or two clothes instead of doing the whole thing. If you can't wash the dishes, maybe do a few so that you feel productive without pushing yourself too much. Okay, next is setting boundaries for yourself. For me, I set boundaries for myself in regards to energy and time, and then I have someone accountable to hold me accountable. So usually I tell Matt, I don't feel so good, let's stay here for maybe about an hour so that I usually don't push myself too much. The next thing is advocate for yourself. Remember that you know your body the best, even if doctors might say one thing. So if you don't feel like it's right, keep searching for answers. Remember that doctors are humans too. They make mistakes, and that's okay. So don't be afraid to keep searching for answers and doing what's best for you. Next, at doctor's appointments, ask questions. A lot of times my doctors speak in a whole other language, and then I feel bad asking them to explain what they just said. So ask them to clarify. Don't be afraid to ask questions and come prepared for doctor's appointments. Have your notes, have your research. Okay, wow, this is a lot. Next is find the right balance. So like I said before, sometimes the things that are important to your mental health can be exhausting for your physical health. But remember that your mental health is just as important. So if you need to go out and see your friends or get fresh air, get some sun, even if that means maybe having some physical consequences later and you're okay with it, then that's okay. Find the balance that's right for you. Lastly is, or not lastly, almost lastly, have a support system and communicate openly with them. Identify 3 people or 4 people in your life that are your support system. People that you can text, contact when you have bad days, bad symptoms, and you need help. It's okay if it's not every single person. A lot of times people are always asking, how are you, Pai? And I love sharing, but you can't always share your whole life with everyone. But make sure you have people in your life that know what's going on in your life. Next is remember you're not alone. For me, when I got sick, I felt like no one was my age. No one was my age and had the illness that I had. And then I went to social media and I found hundreds and thousands of people. So watch YouTube videos, podcasts, blogs, internet. And if you have social media, follow people who have illnesses just like you. The next thing is something that I love, treat yourself. Every time I have blood tests, MRIs, doctor's appointments, I always treat myself so that it's like a positive thing and get myself like a matcha latte or something. Lastly is find things that bring you joy. You're gonna have to find new things that bring you joy. So before, the things that brought me joy, like I said, was exercise and jiu-jitsu, babysitting. So maybe the things that bring you joy now are different. Maybe they're smaller things like items, places, hobbies. For me, things that bring me joy are coffee shops, Christmas music. That's why I put that picture. We had that Christmas tree up, I think in like August, and we left it up for like over a year, just because it brought me joy seeing that. Rain, church, car drives, walking on the beach, flowers. Everyone knows I love flowers, so people give me flowers. So find the little things that bring you joy, because that's crucial for your mental health. Increasing your ability to find joy also provides long-lasting health benefits. Your immune system can be strengthened by your mental state. I found this research article that said there's strong evidence that investing in your emotional needs and well-being is just as important as paying attention to symptoms or experimenting with new treatments. Clinically, these are called social prescribing interventions. So in other words, this is about finding moments of joy and positivity in your illness. And then those can also help you with your health and well-being. Okay, I promise you we're almost done. Lastly is self-care. So I gave you guys pieces of paper. You guys don't have to do it, but identify a self-care plan. So the main things I put on here is physical, spiritual, physiological, emotional, and professional. Whether or not you have a chronic illness or you take care of someone with a chronic illness, it's crucial to take care of yourself. So some things that you may have on there is maybe taking a walk for physical, staying hydrated, going out in the sun, resting. Yours is going to look differently than mine and differently than everyone else's, so make it custom to you. For spiritual, I put serving, devotionals, finding a few minutes every day to take time to talk to God. For psychological, I put journaling, doing one thing for myself. Emotional, I put cuddling with my dogs, maybe doing a hobby, hugging someone. Professional, I put setting boundaries, making time to recharge. When we don't take care of ourselves, this can lead to stress and flare-ups. Even if you are a caretaker, it's crucial to take care of yourselves because then you can't take care of someone when you aren't well. So if you have time, I encourage you guys to make a self-care plan. You can obviously make it custom to you guys because mine's not going to look like yours. Okay, and lastly, I want to close with some of the lessons that I've learned and I'm still learning from having chronic illness. Number 1 is finding the small miracles in your life. Intentionally look and seek joy in things around you and in other people. Next is learning how to simply be and sit in God's presence. For those of you guys who don't know the story of Mary and Martha, Martha is the person who's constantly cleaning and getting the house ready for Jesus, where Mary is the one just sitting at Jesus' feet and listening. I'm a Martha, or at least I was, I still kind of am, but being sick kind of forced me to be a Mary and to not always have to be so busy and doing something. I'm learning how to simply just be and sit in God's presence. Next is embracing your weaknesses and letting God work through you. You do not always have to be strong. It's okay and so important to embrace and admit your weaknesses, because that's when God and others can work through you. Next is do not feel guilty for being sick. You give yourself grace. You're resting and trying to heal. There may be people who may make it feel like it's your fault that you're sick. Maybe you make it feel like it's your fault for being sick, but it's not. So give yourself grace every single day. Next is rest is productive. You do not need to earn rest. I used to think that I need to earn rest, and I used to feel guilty for resting. But rest is crucial for healing. Living with illness requires rest, and you're not lazy for doing so. So if you wouldn't make someone feel bad for resting, don't make yourself feel bad for doing so. Next is you deserve being heard, that your voice matters and your health matters. So advocate for yourself because you are important. Next is God is not only with you in your suffering, but he shares in your suffering. Remember that God suffered, and when we suffer, he suffers too. Next is it's okay to say no, even to the good things. Saying no to some things means saying yes to more important things. This is hard for me because I automatically want to say yes to everything because I have a people-pleasing nature. But however, saying no to things means that I'm also saying yes to other things because I'm saving my energy and my time. And when I say yes to some things, I'm also saying no to other things. Next is sometimes the short-term pain and consequences is worth the memories and stories you're creating. People tell me don't push myself too much and to rest, and this is great advice. And I do take time to rest. But if I don't push myself sometimes, things will never get done or I will never get out. My symptoms are chronic, which means it never goes away. And sometimes I'd rather push myself and make a difference in my life and other people's lives than be in less pain. Being my joyful, outgoing self is part of who I am, and that means sacrificing physically. But I'm okay with that. I've had bad flare-ups and high fevers on my graduation day. I was actually in the ER a few days writing my valedictorian speech. A few days before graduation, I had flare-ups at my high school banquet. I had countless parties, events, and important things. But at the end of the day, or in a few months or years, I really won't remember how I felt physically on those days, but I'll remember how I made someone feel loved or valued. I will remember the memories and the stories that I have. I'll remember creating memories with the kids and singing and dancing with them. You'll see me running and dancing with kids, and I love doing that because at the end of the day, maybe I made a kid feel valued. So while I believe that resting is important, and you shouldn't overdo yourself, there are times where I do push myself, and I don't regret it. Lastly is your worth is not in productivity, your career, your accomplishments, but in God. For me, all of these things are super important. Having a good job, being at the top, having the best grades. But if I put my identity in those things, I would have nothing. If I put my identity in being a coach or a good friend or a competitor, I wouldn't have anything because I lost a lot of those things. I graduated a year late in high school. I was the oldest out of my class. I didn't work for the longest time. I went to school online. And living with chronic illness just sets you back a lot. If you believe your worth and your value is in these things, it's going to really hurt you. But for me, I believe my worth and my value is who I belong to, and that is God. I want to close with a quote. You You guys made it through the whole presentation. I'm so proud of you guys. I want to close with a quote. You never know how much your kindness, your compassion can transform someone's life. Each and every one of you hold so much power to make a change. And so many of you have impacted my health and my life in a positive way. And I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for listening to my story and the story of so many people who have illnesses. I encourage you guys to tell your story as well. And that's it. Thank you.